Hello, and welcome back to the Gotti Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different designers, architects, and industry thought leaders to help educate you in your work. My name is Joe Gotti, and I'm the COO and Director of Design here at Gotti Furniture. For today's episode of the podcast, I have the opportunity to talk with Frank Allen, Senior Associate Director of the John C Hitt Library at the University of Central Florida. Frank has been with UCF since 1998. He also previously served as co-editor for the Resource Guide on Planning Library Buildings and Learning Spaces. He's an expert in his field, and we're honored to have him here today. Welcome to the podcast, Frank. How you doing?
I'm doing real well, Joe. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here and be able to chat a little bit about libraries and library buildings.
Yeah, are you guys staying dry down there? I know you've had a lot of
inclement
weather recently.
We've had a very dry winter. we just got a little rain shower a few days ago, but very dry after a very wet fall with a record rain-producing hurricane. But that seems to be life these days. Big swings.
Yeah. I can't imagine. Luckily in the Midwest, we have our ups and downs, but the weather seems to say, fairly steady for the most part. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we're just used to the ups and downs and the inconsistency of it. It's less jarring for us. But we didn't bring you here to talk about weather. Usually we like to start off with just kind of getting a little background on you, how you kind of got to where you are today.
Okay. Well, I have been a librarian since the early 1990s. And prior to that, I had a brief stint in the, shall we say, the business world in banking and real estate, and quickly determined that I really wasn't a business person. So somehow discovered librarianship. And the minute I did, I sort of fell in love with it. And spent 6 years up at Virginia Commonwealth University, sort of get my sea legs, so to speak. Had a great experience up there. And then I have been, as you mentioned, in Orlando at UCF since 1998. It's amazing, going on 25 years. And so I guess it means that I like it, and I do. I love the university, and I love the library, and I like my job. I wear three hats: finance, facilities, and HR, or as someone said, money, buildings, and people. So it's been a wonderful career, and I wouldn't be surprised if I finish it out here.
Nice. So so you went from banking into library. So what prompted that? What prompted the transition?
Well, I did carry forward into my librarianship some of those attributes, because I'm the CFO here, so to speak. I do enjoy numbers and accounting, and with my real estate background, I think I sort of gravitated towards library facilities, renovations, construction. So there were some crossovers there, but yeah, I had an MBA, and like I said, I did and still do enjoy accounting and business, but I just didn't particularly get a kick out of working in a big corporate scene. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm more of a service sector person. I think at heart, what I get a kick out of is seeing the students in the building, enjoying the space, and as opposed to perhaps maybe being part of a company that's making a lot of money. Yeah. So that's now how I got into librarianship is a long, twisted road. For a lot of librarians, for many, it is their second career, and I sort of just fell into it just by happenstance. But I think it was a great happenstance. So yeah, here I am 30 years later, chatting with you about libraries.
So when you left the banking sector and then went into libraries, did you go directly into facilities management?
Well, no. Good. That's very good. No, I didn't. I initially started out as a reference librarian.
Oh, wow.
Which was and still is a very traditional path. Mm-hmm. And of course, my subject area was business. And so I could have easily become a business information specialist and stayed in that track for the rest of my career. And I think I would have been pretty good at it because I had a natural affinity for business information sources. But somehow I remember I saw a job ad. I was at the University of Tennessee working as a reference librarian, and I saw a position announcement for the head of administrative services at Virginia Commonwealth University Library. And I said, wow, that looks interesting. And I applied, and next thing I knew, my wife and I were living in Richmond. And I had 6 wonderful years there, worked for a fantastic director. She was a huge mentor. And then this position came open, and we ended up in Orlando, which coincidentally happens to be my hometown. I say coincidence. I say coincidence because for the librarians out there, you all can appreciate this. Academic librarianship is a very tiny field, and there are not many jobs. There's probably less than 100 jobs around the country at large academic libraries like the job I have. So you don't pick out a city and say, that's where we're going to go next. Like if you were a teacher or a nurse.
Yeah.
You don't. You wait to see where the opportunities are. And it just so happened that the opportunity ended up in my hometown, which again is pretty amazing coincidence.
Yeah.
So we've been very fortunate. So
yeah. How serendipitous and how blessed you are. That's great.
Yeah. Yep.
So like earlier you're talking about facilities management, and that's what one of the topics I want to talk to you about today. So you manage a pretty large facility there.
Yes.
And full disclosure, we've done a few renovation projects with you. So yeah, I thought that would be a good place for us to start. I think it would be great to get some like background on the facility, the kind of the goals you've had in mind for it, things like that.
Okay. So UCF, University of Central Florida, has experienced enormous growth in enrollment and in stature since the early 1990s. And like a tripling of enrollment since the early 1990s. There may not be another university that has grown that rapidly. I think we were in the low 20,000 range in the early 90s. Don't quote me on that. And we're at about 69 or 70 now. So more than a tripling. So the building naturally, which had been built in 1966, became terribly inadequate, if for no other reason than just to be able to seat the number of students that you want to be able to accommodate. There are ratios out there. They've changed over the years. ACRL used to have a ratio of something like you should be able to seat 20% of your student FTE. Well, nobody does that. But there are ratios that you can use as a guide. And so over the years, the enrollment greatly outstripped the number of public seats in the building.
Oh, wow.
Even after an addition, a doubling of the library size in 1984, by the late 1990s, even after that doubling, the seating was still terribly inadequate. And also, as you can probably appreciate, as the building was aging, it wasn't just about number of seats. All the systems in the building were aging. And so it got to a point where, and the university was extremely supportive, determined that we needed, if not a new library, we needed an expanded and a not just renovated, but almost reconstructed library. What I mean by that is that, so just to fast forward, once all the approvals were made and all of the money part, what we're doing is that we are slowly rebuilding each floor of a 5-floor building. We can
Okay.
only do a floor at a time because the money is coming in tranches. It's
Mm.
coming in. It's coming. We didn't get all the money at once, so we're rebuilding. When I say rebuilding, we are literally gutting every floor. We just finished renovating the third floor, and when we started and did the demo, uh, I walked through it several times. The only thing was a concrete slab and a concrete deck above, and load-bearing columns and load-bearing perimeter walls, and an elevator, 2 elevator shafts, and an air conditioning chase. Literally every interior wall was blown out.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you could like, hit a golf ball from one end of the very long building to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a renovation. Essentially, it's a reconstruction, and it was needed. So obviously, all systems are being replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're calling it is the 21st Century Library project, and it's going to span a number of years. Each floor, from beginning of planning to ribbon cutting, is taking 2 to 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
So you can just kind of do the math and see.
Yeah.
This is a 10+ year project.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of jumping around here. We just opened the third floor, and on February 27th.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've got lots of pictures on the website. I must say it was one of the most exciting days of my career, because we did a little treasure hunt type scavenger hunt thing to get the students to come into the building. And we opened the doors at 9:00. By 11:00, the floor was completely, maybe not mobbed, but we had hundreds of students in the space.
Great.
And a lot of this, of course, we had created a lot of social media. There was huge anticipation. The students knew about it, but it was one of the most exciting days of my life, because I was walking around with a number of us were, and you could overhear them chatting with each other, talking about, like, using words like, "This is amazing." And, I'm so happy that they opened it up finally. And I saw one little something that was written up on a whiteboard, something like, "This is way cool, COOOOOL." And so, completely unsolicited, students just chatting with themselves. And so, I mean, literally from day one, they sort of took ownership. It's like they owned the floor by the end of the first day. And that's what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, by mid-afternoon that day, literally every group study room, every table, every spot had somebody in it. I mean, I wouldn't say every seat had a person in it. At a 6-person table, you rarely get 6 people sitting unless they all know each other. But they had just completely descended. So that's the kind of thing that gets me excited, more than working in a bank or whatever. So
yeah. It tells. It comes through.
Oh yeah. It was a great day. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of questions I have for you in there.
Yeah.
One being, it's interesting. I know we've done a few phases with you on this project, but I didn't realize, like, the progression and how it was kind of going, and makes sense with the money. You go with the money.
Right. Right.
But I'm wondering, has there been like a hidden opportunity in the fact of, like, being able to go floor by floor, maybe take your time?
Yes.
Usually sometimes what I find with people, it's like, you do everything at once. And I come from a product design background.
Right.
Every time I do something, I learn something. And every time I do something, I learn something. Has you been able to take advantage of that?
Absolutely. That is one of the benefits. No question about it. That we have. I'm trying to think of some examples of how we have learned, because the third floor was not the first phase. This is actually, if you include the ARC, which is the Automated Storage and Retrieval Center, it's actually the 4th phase.
Oh, wow.
But we did a sort of a kickoff phase on our top floor
Mm-hmm.
in 2018. The top floor is actually smaller than some of the other floors in terms of public space.
Mm-hmm.
It really kicked off the project. 170 seats of what we call silent study, meaning nothing, no quiet, no noise, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was followed by the Arc, which was followed by an extension. Actually, we did add on to the size of the building modestly. And that third phase was an extension to the back of the building on 4 floors, which was very complex because you're getting little extra pieces of building on each floor. And then the most recent phase, the third floor, was the first floor where we renovated an entire lateral slice of the building.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the first time you could actually get a picture of what the eventual completed building will look like, stem to stern.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the building is designed, if you stand in a certain spot, a very small spot, you can actually see now from one end of the building all the way back to the north end of the building. So what did we learn? Well, some little things and some big things. Wire management is huge.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah.
I would say there's still probably a few things we might do differently with the next phase.
Mm-hmm.
But
now, is that wire management in the furniture?
With the furniture.
Furniture,
the furniture.
What was the biggest challenge in there? Is it the electrical? Is it the data? Is it both?
Well, it's anything. Of course, the big thing these days is I won't say it's 100%. Probably over 85% of our seats have what I call arm's reach access to power.
Okay.
I mean, that's a given these days.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, those tables and workstations and booths and banquettes have to be wired, or at least they have to have wiring up to a little pop-out outlet.
Yep.
So the issue, though, is that the manufacturers are still, in my estimation, learning how to aesthetically and securely do the wiring. We have had to go back, particularly with not this phase, but the phase before. We had to go back. We're sort of doing it on our own just because it's too much trouble, and literally zip tie a lot of wires and cables to both get them out of the way visually because they're ugly.
Yeah.
But also to keep the students from kicking them and tripping over them and unplugging them.
Yes.
And all this type of thing. So it's an ongoing issue. I think the results with the new floor that we opened up are a little bit better.
Okay.
So
what's made them a little bit better than the previous ones?
A little more robust.
Okay.
Like some housing. I mean, you're in the furniture business.
Yes.
These
like chimneys.
Almost looks. Yeah. It's that what it does is it contains the wire, and it also looks a little bit better.
Yeah.
So another thing that we did, I don't know if it's so much a lesson learned, but we were late in the design process for the third floor when we decided, of course, group study rooms are a huge deal. They're very popular. And we have 30 of them on this new floor that we just opened up, which was more than we had in the entire building originally.
Oh, wow.
So we will have close to 90 group studies in the completed building. But what we did, we made a late change. We decided to take 7 of those rooms and take the front off and the door and turn them into 3-sided alcoves that are not reservable. And the idea is that, yes, it's nice to have reservable study rooms, But I think sometimes students also like to just spontaneously or serendipitously,
Mm-hmm.
they'll just want to find an area to gather.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's a group project,
Mm-hmm.
and so they don't necessarily need to go into a room and shut a door.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes I think they actually kind of like the idea of being in a defined space, but they're not behind a closed door.
Yes.
So we turned what were going to be 7 study rooms into what I call study alcoves, and they
Mm-hmm.
can't be reservable because
Yep.
it's just first come first serve. So that and they seem to love them. Let's see. Well, it would take too much to get into the weeds here. There were some furniture styles that we saw in the last phase
Mm-hmm.
that we just didn't want to do again.
Okay.
One part of it might have been maybe not, excuse me, maybe not as sturdy
Okay. Some
as we would
durability
like.
challenges, maybe.
Yeah, not that they're falling apart, but
Yeah.
we sort of look at some of these pieces and say, how long is that really going to last? So let's move to a different style for the next phase. So we did a fair amount of that.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's any other examples. Um,
That's a great opportunity to
yeah,
take advantage of and learning, because we
yeah,
like, obviously we focus on public space environments, but I tell people, especially with fabrics and stuff,
oh,
we
yeah,
do a
go
lot
ahead.
of internal testing. I just spent the last hour before this meeting looking at probably 7 different shapes of a stool, flat
Yep.
stools. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
what you can't predict is like field performance. And after
Right.
like the last 5 were about how do we minimize a pinch point underneath that maybe somebody hypothetically can get at. And so it's a great opportunity I think for you guys, is that, yeah, you can try some stuff, but you're not locked into 5 floors all at once. And it's really just hard to predict field performance. It's challenging.
Well, speaking of field performance, here's another thing that we learned. The little lamps, the little task lamps. Now, I'm not talking about like the banker lamps that like sit on a table.
Yeah.
But the little task lamps that are clamped in a high position and you can sort of twist them down. No, they break. Boom. They do not last. They do not last.
I don't mean to laugh.
We had I don't know how many of them. Just it's also and this seems to be universal. So I'm not picking on any manufacturers. The metal seems to be like a cheap kind of cast, kind of cheap kind of metal that many times it just literally would snap.
Oh, wow.
I mean, can you imagine a student? See, one of the things that I also think, and again, we love working with the man. Well, you're a manufacturer. What am I saying? I think a fair amount of the furniture, at least I would have definitely said this 15 years ago, it was originally designed for an office environment.
Yeah.
And it was being sort of redesigned for higher ed. Now, of course, there's a lot of furniture coming out now that is more tailored for a pure public kind of installation. But if you put, what I'm getting to here is that, and I noticed this with a project we did back in 2010. Clearly, it looks like an office chair, and it's got maybe 6 ways that you can adjust it, which is fabulous. It's fabulous if you're in an office.
Yeah.
You might make an adjustment once every 3 months. But think about putting that chair in a public library where now that little adjuster is being pulled and tugged on maybe 3 times a day. Not 5 times a day. So the durability is huge.
Yes. Yeah.
So we keep saying it's almost like you can't build it strong enough
Yeah.
because we also can't afford to replace furniture every 5 years. I
Yeah.
mean, so that is one thing about modern library, furniture installation is that we're taking out furniture that literally could last 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
Those old wooden, carrels and
Hmm.
wooden chair. I mean, no, they didn't look as good, and maybe ergonomically they weren't quite as comfortable. But you're trading out something that will last 30 years with something that's going to maybe last, I don't know, 15 years if you're lucky.
Hmm.
So, um, so, so yeah, I think durability, wiring.
Yeah.
I could probably think of other examples, but you're right. That is one of the examples
Yeah.
of renovating as we go. No
Yeah.
question about it. Although it's a
Yeah.
pain in the rear, it's a pain in the neck. It's also going to end up probably costing twice, as you can imagine, if we
Sure.
had just built a whole new library.
Yeah.
But that's another story.
Yeah.
We decided we wanted to stay right where we were,
Hmm.
as opposed to building a new library out on the edge of campus.
Yeah.
We felt it was important. We have a great location.
Hmm.
I mean, location is everything.
Yeah.
So we decided to stay put and renovate, and boy, though, it's, it's dusty. It's, so,
Sure.
but it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The journey can be a little rough, but the end result I think will be
Oh,
well
oh
worth
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. 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 And the building has character. I mean, it doesn't have character like some of these. We were talking about your turn of the century
Oh
office
yeah.
building. Our building is a classic 1960s.
Okay.
I don't know if you call it international style, but
Hmm.
it's a classic 60s look for a library, and I mean that in a good way
Hmm.
because there's a lot of 1960s libraries that aren't so attractive. Ours has some interesting exterior features to it. So it's definitely worth renovating.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, let me ask you this too. So, because like you pointed out, we're a manufacturer. We make furniture.
Yeah.
So from like a furniture perspective, you've gone through a few phases here. Like I said before, we've
Hmm.
worked on a few of those phases with you. Um, Maybe you could like walk people through the thought process of like, okay, how did we pick what we picked? What were we
Hmm.
trying to do with the furniture?
Okay.
I talk a lot about balance between, group, individuals,
Hmm.
large groups, small groups, stuff like that. Maybe take us through that journey a little bit.
Well, it wasn't, and it is not just the library.
Hmm.
I would describe it as at least a three-way partnership
Okay.
between the library and our architect, who, by the way, has been with us since day one, and then the furniture manufacturers, vendors, the dealer reps.
Hmm.
And so between the three of us, the final product emerges. Because really, we're librarians. We aren't really furniture experts. I mean,
Hmm.
we sort of, what we do is we observe what we
Hmm.
think works out on the floor. And what we in fact, I did a little study. It was very old school, where I literally um, I made observations
Hmm.
on 30 different days
Okay.
of where the students were sitting, and I didn't use any special software. I just did it with my eyeballs and a clipboard and walking around. And I got very good at it because I could cover the whole building in about 35 to 40 minutes. Making little orange dots on a planogram of the furniture layout. So we're pretty good at knowing what our patrons
Hmm.
like, but we may not be the experts on, hey, here's a new design that we think might work for you, or a new type of furniture that we think might work for you. So that's where I think you all and even and the architects, like, this whole trend of pods, which are, hugely popular. Everybody's doing them. I don't know that a librarian would have come up with that. But the minute I saw it, I thought, oh yeah, they're going to love these pods because they love the little banquettes. And so the booths is what I was. By the way, what's the difference between a banquette and a booth?
Question. I would attribute them to be about the same.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I tend to use it interchangeably. But I heard somebody saying that, well, Frank, a pod is just a one-person booth, which is
exactly
what
right.
it is. It's what it is. You may have said that. But anyway, so I think it's really a combination of, our architects are always trying to be out there, with the new thing. And then the manufacturers are also doing that, but maybe they're more focused on, building something that's not going to fall apart. And then, so it's really a partnership.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to give librarians too much credit, but I will say this. We, on 2 occasions now, with 2 of our phases, we have done sit tests where we, with our students, and let them help decide what we're going to buy. And it's worked fabulously. On both occasions, we had over 3, we built an app, and the students would download the app, and they would test out different types of seating, and then they would grade it on the app. I like this one, I don't like this one. And now really what they were doing is they were judging more the physical seat itself. It wasn't so much the enclosure, like maybe the booth or the style of the booth. A lot of it was, is this comfortable? But we actually, I should correct myself. We did have a couple of different styles of pods, and one was clearly more popular than the other. So, so that's enough. So maybe it's a 4-way. So because we do like to get our students involved.
Yeah.
The other thing, we survey our students a lot.
Okay.
And the other big thing, of course, is the whole balancing between collaborative versus quiet study areas. And you design your seating around your goal. Is this a collaborative area or is this a quiet zone? And the seating style follows. So and of course the whole thing about power. I mean, we've been surveying. If I had to say on our student surveys, the 2 most important things that come up are power, and also we need more quiet seating.
Oh, interesting. Now, is that quiet as individual or quiet as group or both?
Well, it's, in other words, we're kind of victims of our own success. We have areas in the building. I mean, I think even in the old 1980s library that we had, which was, lovely shades of avocado green and harvest gold. I mean, literally, we still have some of that. I mean, no kidding. I think they loved us even back then. And we've always had really good, strong patronage. And there are areas in the building that, I don't know who coined it. Maybe it was me, that we call like the mosh pit, where they just take over an area, and it's usually like tables, that seat at least 6, and it will become just a swarm of students, and they're not goofing around, and they're not roughhousing, although sometimes it kind of gets close. But so we have a lot of that. So you have an equal and opposite number of students that say, get me away from that. I just need a quiet place to study.
Mhm.
So in all academic libraries are doing this. So you create floors that are designated for, and you try not to mix the two because it gets, this is a quiet floor, this is a collaborative floor. So the students are helping to also drive the furniture design. So I mean, it's what am I up to? 4 different parties here. Yeah, it's a group effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to
Yeah.
jump back to something you brought up earlier. You said you kind of walked around for about 30 days and did this kind of observational test.
Oh yeah.
What were the results of that?
Oh, well, I actually, and I got the results published. It's in JAL, if anybody wants to look it up.
Okay.
You can just Google my name. And yeah, I was even a bit surprised. What I found, and I did this right before we threw away a bunch of old furniture. And I'm kind of glad I did it because I was able to compare older furniture designs and areas with areas that had already been renovated. And one of the most interesting findings, and I don't know, Joe, you may not like this, is that I found that power, I can make an argument that having power may actually be more important than a nice, slick, new study carrel. And the way I kind of, that kind of was a pleasant deduction. So I looked at, so I was surveying the whole building. And as I said, at that moment in time, we still had a lot of old wooden study carrels.
Yeah.
Some were singles, and some were doubles, and then some were what we called pinwheel.
Yep.
Which is, nobody does that anymore. I guess it's kind of efficient, but like a quad.
Yep.
Okay. And then we have a very similar quad study carrel. Y'all didn't do it, but up in our new quiet study area. Same idea. It's basically a 4-person study carrel. It's all new. It's beautiful, So I'll try to make a long story short. What I discovered was that the old-fashioned wooden 4-person study carrels that did not have power, which we called the power deserts, were the least used. Okay, naturally. Okay, it's old and it's got no power. Okay, then we had retrofitted a bunch of same thing.
Yeah.
Same 4-person study carrel, but they were in locations either next to a column or on an exterior wall where we could feed power. We have some real creative people in our staff here, where we were actually drilling grommet holes and feeding power out of wall outlets up into these study carrels. Sometimes we would actually just screw an old-fashioned strip right onto the wood. It doesn't look great, but it works. And so then I surveyed a lot of those old but powered 4-persons. And then we had the new, beautiful, new and powered 4-person carrels. What I found was that I even remember the percentages. So I had about like 26% usage, give or take, of the old unpowereds, like something like 70+% usage of the new ones that had power. But the old ones that had power were like in the mid to high 50s. And so, in other words, that gap there, 2/3 of the way up, you can move up 2/3 of the way up that gap between the low and the high by just putting power into those old wooden carrels.
Yeah.
And I think for libraries that cannot afford to do $100 million, which is what we're going to end up spending,
Oh, wow.
over a period of years.
Sure.
If you can't afford to buy a bunch of nice new furniture, you just give them power.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And they will, because I mean, the numbers really popped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I noticed was that, and this shouldn't be a surprise, is that 6-person tables that have dividers get twice the utilization of 6-person tables that don't have dividers, because everybody likes to have their space.
Yes.
So again, if you're trying to max out, usage, you know what I mean by the dividers. They could be 6. They could even be as little as 6 inches high.
Yeah.
You can. Now, we didn't do any retrofitting there. They were newer tables that had dividers, but I couldn't help but notice that the utilization goes way, way up if you simply have little dividers, because nobody wants to touch anybody else's elbow. The other thing is it prevents a student from flopping down with their backpack and taking up intentionally, just kind of hogging a huge amount of space, so nobody's near them. See. Now, the other thing though that I observed is that, but you don't want all of your big tables to have dividers, because a lot of the utility of those big 6-person tables is for a group who all know each other. If they all know each other, they don't mind touching elbows. See, so you need to have open tables, because of a lot of the group study, we don't even 30. I mean, you can't build enough group study rooms. You're still going to have groups that just gather together out in the middle of an open floor and just start talking. So you've got to have open tables. The other thing, I mean, there were lots of findings. The little 2-topper cafe high tables with stools were the least popular. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them.
Yep.
But they're almost like ornamentation. I mean, they're not really for serious study.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to sit at one of those. It's like a 2-topper you'd see at a cafe. Yeah. You're not going to sit there for 3 or 4 hours.
No, it's touchdown space.
Exactly. So there were lots of findings from that little study I did. It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah. I can make an argument that the 20% that you got on Carol's Without Power was literally probably of a lack of options of spaces to sit.
Well, true. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how they would even sit in the. I think also sometimes some students, because they're the least popular, they're also quiet. They're in very quiet areas. Some students, they may have a fully charged laptop and a fully charged phone. I just want to be somewhere that's quiet. So they'll sit there in a power desert because nobody else is sitting there. So yeah,
no, that makes sense. So we're getting close to the end here. So I just have a few more questions for you. I guess kind of big picture. What would you say would be kind of the biggest trend that you're seeing kind of connect with your students kind of over the last year or so?
I would say,
besides power,
repeating myself a little bit, we continue to get more and more requests for quiet seating.
Now going back, is it between the groups or the individuals, or is it
individuals?
Okay.
I think, and we're providing it. I don't know if this is a trend. We're still putting desktop PCs out in public spaces.
Oh, okay.
A lot of libraries I understand, are moving away from that. It's the whole BYOD, bring your own device.
Yeah.
But what we see is that they like them. And my supposition is that everybody's got a laptop or an iPad these days. Everybody, literally every student. But there's nothing like having a big 23-inch monitor
Yeah.
and a big dedicated keyboard if you're going to sit down and do some serious like writing.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's hardwired. The
Mm-hmm.
data is hardwired. Maybe it's a little bit stronger
Mm-hmm.
signal, and maybe slightly faster than the
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. But we're still not. We're still putting desktops out there,
Mm-hmm.
and the students tell us that they like them.
Yeah.
And so the other thing we're doing is it's also kind of retro in a way. It's kind of funny. Our students, they like to come to the library for a little bit of almost like recreation.
Okay.
So we just on this third floor that we just opened, we bought a bunch of board games and just
Mm-hmm.
put them out there, and they don't even
Mm-hmm.
have to be checked out. It's kind of honor system. I mean, they're cheap. And we've asked them, please, and we put the pieces in little bags, and the bag will say, this bag should have 12 pieces in it. So when you're done, make sure you put 12 pieces in it to keep, so that, help them to
Yeah.
keep up with. So little things like that.
Hmm.
They get we've got the chess players,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a chess club that comes into the library on Fridays, and they'll have like 8 games going on at the same time.
Oh, cool.
So the library is a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's a place obviously for serious research,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a place for it's a safe place
Mm-hmm.
for a type of quasi-social academic type activity.
Yeah.
And I mean, when I say safe, I think that unlike the old study hall,
Mm-hmm.
which may have not even had any, it may have been completely unmonitored, or it might have had a student over there who's, half asleep. My observation is that the students see an academic library as a safe, welcoming place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And also a place to see and be seen.
Sure.
My other little thing here, I think, is for every effort that the university makes to go to online learning or to
Mm-hmm.
take the classroom online, I think there's like an equal and opposite need for students to connect,
Yes.
to physically connect,
Yeah.
not even necessarily with their friends, but just to be in a room with other students.
Yeah.
So I really think that we've got that dynamic going.
Yeah.
I mean, 36% of our student credit hours are now online. And,
Oh,
and that,
wow.
I think that's going to continue to go up.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you still have this basic human fundamental need,
Yeah.
not everybody, to be with other people.
Yeah.
And so we design with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting to hear you say that, because that's almost like you almost get that kind of perspective from public libraries, where it's like, hey, it's not just a place to get the books or the computer.
Right.
It's more of a resource and activity, seen place. It's interesting to hear they say on an academic level, but I think, yeah, that's an interesting observation about as it's going more towards online, humans still want to be around other humans. And yeah, you may see that kind of increased need in that kind of public space, kind of gathering environment. That makes a lot of sense. Interesting.
The other big thing we're doing, which doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with furniture, is our tech lending desk has just exploded in popularity in the last few years. But what I mean by that, and again, most academic libraries are doing this, we lend everything from laptops to iPads to digital SLRs to scientific calculators to every kind of cable you could ever need to literally dozens of devices that plug in.
Oh, wow.
And that desk last year did over 80,000 lending transactions.
Oh, wow.
It's by far the most the most heavily trafficked service desk. And so it just brings them in,
Yeah.
and they love it. And so, I mean, because we at UCF, we have a lot of uh, uh, first generation students that
Okay.
maybe they don't quite have quite as many economic and financial advantages.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a real need, or like just if my laptop, if it broke,
Yeah.
and I need a loaner for a week,
Yeah.
I mean, there's any number of so the tech lending is just enormous, and so naturally, but they all need power. So we're kind of full circle. We're sort of
Yeah.
back to the power thing. So they go plop themselves down somewhere, and they want to sit. The other thing we're noticing anecdotally, we're trying to gather some data on this. I think that our occupancy is growing. The gate
Okay.
count
Mm-hmm.
may not be growing that much,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the length of time
Oh
that
yeah.
the student is in the building is
Mm-hmm.
increasing,
Yeah.
which means that even if you have a flat gate count, you have a fuller building
Building.
because
Yeah.
they're in your building for more hours.
Yeah.
So they're not coming in as much to check out a book and then walk out the door.
Yeah.
They're coming in for a longer kind of duration.
Yeah.
And so a place to, as I heard one of my colleagues at Emory said one time, he said, yeah, we build our furniture for students to be able to camp out all
Yeah.
day. And that's kind of, I think we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
and it's got to be sturdy. See how it all goes in circles.
All comes together.
It's got to have power. It's got to be sturdy, and it's got to be ergonomic. The other thing, it's ergonomic. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
sit there all day, it has to be not only comfy, but the positioning and the angles and everything
Absolutely.
has to be, and of course, variety, because there's different body types. I mean,
Sure.
you know all this. Some one thing we need to do better next time. I mean, I'm sure we're running. I'm already hearing that maybe we didn't have enough chairs without arms for
Interesting.
larger bodies.
Yeah. At like the computer tables or work tables or
Everywhere.
something?
I mean, so
Interesting.
the natural inclination is, oh yeah, yeah, have arms. It's more comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm sitting here right now. I've got my arms on these armrests here, but larger larger statured people
Mm-hmm.
may not fit quite so well
Yeah.
in a chair that has arms.
Yeah.
So we may need to revisit that a little bit. It's like a
Yeah.
little bit like the left hand, right hand thing. We need to kind of maybe need to tweak that mix a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. Have more armless
Yeah.
chairs. So
No, that makes sense. It's interesting, and it
yeah.
may not even be size. It just could be personal preference because I know
Both.
about half of my office, at least half, like we have chairs and armchairs and armless chairs, and half of them like, no, I just don't like having arms. It's like, oh, interesting.
Well, you're right. In fact, that may be more of a driver.
Yeah.
People may just have personal preference.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, we could sit here and talk all day.
That's right.
I know time's limited.
Yeah. Well, no, I really appreciate all the insights that you share with us and your time. The only thing I was going to, kind of wrap us up here to see if you have any, like in our closing, any kind of words of wisdom for people out there. You shared a lot of wisdom, but I would see if you have any kind of one strong piece of wisdom you could share with everybody.
About what? Furniture design or
anything
what?
you think is important to the library community? Maybe your biggest lesson learned.
Well, you got to listen to your students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
Between surveying them in a very
Mm-hmm.
traditional sense, and then also, the sit testing, and then
Sure.
also just the observation.
Yeah.
And we've had charrettes too. We haven't done one of those in a while.
Mm-hmm.
That actually that may be the most scientifically best way
Okay.
to do it, because you get into a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the big, consumer products companies, they do charrettes.
Yeah.
And so we did some charrettes for an early project we did about 10 years ago. It was fascinating
Mm-hmm.
because you end up with a little bit more refined data set than just
Okay.
people like checking boxes on a survey.
Yeah.
So I think listening to the students
Yeah.
is critical, and also hire a good architect and get good product. Don't buy cheap furniture.
Yeah.
Just no. Don't buy cheap furniture. It does not pay for itself.
Yeah.
And so just a lot of sensible kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the one thing you can't skew it too much towards the students because they don't know what's coming down the pike. So
Yeah.
it's a balance. You also need to rely on your architect and your furniture vendor to introduce new ideas.
Yeah.
Because the students, that's kind of almost not a backward looking, but maybe a sideway looking.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas your architect and your furniture vendor are going to be giving you some ideas that are more out there and more progressive. So it's a blend. But I don't know, words of advice. I don't know.
I think that
I
makes
guess
sense.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that makes sense. The charrette is, I think, a really good idea that I don't think people always take advantage of. And for those who know what charrette means, it's, a group of getting, a grouping of furniture or product together that people can kind of sit down and evaluate. And I definitely wholeheartedly agree with the survey component. But I think one thing that's, I think, real critical that you pointed out is the observational component. So doing the observation, lining it up with what people say and what people do is sometimes don't always quite line up. And I tend to believe what people do over what people say. But yeah, I think those two things I think are really critical, and especially any kind of problem solving process you're about to go through.
Oh, the other thing you got to listen to your architect. I'll give you an example. This new third floor that we have, it's huge. It's enormous.
Mm-hmm.
It's so big that, and it tends to be open,
Mm-hmm.
not completely. The architect insisted on, as we do each floor, that we have a main pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the floor is carpet. This main pathway is some form of linoleum, and it's a wayfinding mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way for a student or our patron, anybody, to sort of know where they are in the building,
mm-hmm.
and also to just help with navigating. And sure enough, a couple of days after we opened up, I just went down there one day and just sat there and watched. And that purple pathway is like a river of students walking back and forth. And then they'll spin off into the study areas.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, I was joking with our architect the other day. I said, honestly, without that, I think it would be like just a bunch of cattle milling around, sort of bumping into each other. There would be no real definition. So, and he just kind of smiled and said, yeah. And that was, and it's also wide. And and that was the other thing I said, oh, this is too wide. I said, we're sacrificing, study spaces here because it is pretty wide.
Yeah.
He said, nope. This is all, kind of experience and formula driven, and it's pretty wide, but you need it. I mean, literally, it's like a highway.
Yeah.
I mean, the floor seats 520 people, and so and you can have more than that. I mean, well, that's probably but that pathway needs to be that wide. So listen to your architect. Observe. A lot of it's just common sense, but and so those are just some thoughts. And I will say, I need to say this. We very much love the furniture, the Agati furniture that has been. We do have a bit of it in the building, and it's very well built, extremely well built, and it's some of the most popular pieces.
Oh, good.
I mean, honestly, they like to say, oh yeah, no, it's, so we are happy to have been able to, I mean, we have we have a bunch of lines, in the building. and a lot of lines. And so, and that's a good thing too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a smorgasbord. We've got a lot of furniture lines
Yeah.
in the building now. So, but the Agati is a very nice part of the mix. So, yeah, and
That's
thank
great.
you for. I know your dad came down and
Yeah.
helped us with some custom pieces that we did, and he
Oh,
made a
yeah.
special trip down here. I remember that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're all part of a big community here.
Yeah. We call that the Alice in Wonderland room.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know if we talked about this. Some of the students are also calling it the Harry Potter room.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
It's that same whimsical kind of feeling when you're in there. Yeah, yeah. I hadn't heard Alice in Wonderland room. That's a good one. Yeah, the really oversized, the tall chairs, and so yeah,
exactly. Well, Frank, I really appreciate the time today. I think there are a lot of really great insights and lessons for people in here, and I really appreciate you sharing your experience with us.
Well, Joe, it's been a pleasure and nice chatting with you. I've never done one of these before, so I wasn't sure quite how this was going to go, but seems like we've had a nice little chat here. I hope there's some benefit out there. I do tend to get a little bit wordy, so but it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Again, thank you for your time today.
Okay. All right. Take care. Okay.
All right.
Bye.